Today we're going to be ranking NFL general managers. We have 5 main categories ranging from not good to GOAT, and we have 32 general managers. Before we get into it, make sure to comment and let me know where you would rank these GMs in this tier list. First off, we have 4 GMs that were hired earlier this year. It's too early to assess them, so I've put them in their own tier at the bottom. I do believe that Gladstone, Spitek, and Muji all had great draft performances. I had all 3 of them in the top 10 in my draft rankings video. They could end up a lot higher on this tier list by the 2026 season, but it's too early to say right now. So looking at the more experienced GMs, let's get the obvious one out the way. Howie Roseman has to go to GOAT tier. Roseman has built 2 different Super Bowl rosters in a 7-year span, which is completely unheard of. What makes it even more impressive is that he didn't luck into an elite quarterback in the draft. He made teams good enough to win with non-elite quarterback play with Nick Foles and Jalen Hurts. Roseman has done an insane job of finding talent in both free agency and the draft, and has created a present-day juggernaut team that can win in basically any way they want. The Eagles are strong in every position group, and that's due to elite drafting and cap management. I think Howie deserves even more praise than he's gotten. The past 15 years of the NFL have been dominated by Brady and Mahomes, but I think Roseman is also a part of that conversation, especially if the Eagles win another Super Bowl or 2. Monty Ossenfort, he's solid but inconsistent. Since taking over in 2023, Monty's run in Arizona has had its ups and downs. He's benefited greatly from premium draft capital, landing Paris Johnson Jr. and Marvin Harrison Jr. with top 6 picks. His 2023 draft was solid overall. He had a nice hit in the 3rd round with Garrett Williams. 2024, however, was a pretty rough year. The Darius Robinson pick in the 1st round was questionable, and despite having 12 total picks, 7 in the top 100, the overall return from that class has been disappointing. The 2025 class looks decent with potential to develop into something more, but nothing too stand out yet. Outside of the draft, Ossenfort did a nice job signing Froholtz, the center, who's become very reliable for Arizona, but letting Zach Allen and Byron Murphy walk, combined with a weak 2024 free agency class, really hurt the roster. That 2024 offseason drags him down, so I'd place him in the lower end of the average tier. Next up is Terry Fontenot. While I like him more than most, he belongs in the not good tier, mainly due to poor draft decisions. He took Kyle Pitts at number 4 in 2021 over stars like Jamar Chase, Penei Sewell, and Micah Parsons. A questionable move in terms of both skill and positional value. In 2022, he chose Drake London over Garrett Wilson. Not a crazy pick, but I think he missed with that one. London's production looks better on paper than actually on film, in my opinion. Then came Bijan Robinson in 2023. Great player, but redundant with Algier already on the roster, especially with Jalen Carter still available. In 2024, Fontenot signed Kirk Cousins to a huge deal and then drafted Michael Penix Jr. at number 8. An alarming decision from a team-building standpoint. 2025 was probably his best draft. He finally got some good pass rushers in James Pierce and Jalen Walker after years of missing in the draft. Fontenot used 8 picks on D-line from 2021 to 2024, and basically all of them missed. Free agency has been hit or miss for him. The Cousins deal was really bad, but signing Jesse Bates was an amazing move. Overall, Fontenot has made too many high-cost mistakes and hasn't gotten enough in return. At this point, he should be on the hot seat. Next up, Eric DeCosta. He's going into above average. He was lucky enough to inherit Lamar Jackson, who's kept his squad as a top contender. That's something we have to consider here. Let's look at the good side of DeCosta's tenure. He traded for Roquan Smith in 2022, giving up a 2nd rounder and getting an all-pro linebacker who's a big-time playmaker for them. He also got a 2nd rounder by shipping out Hayden Hurst. He picked up Derrick Henry in free agency. All of those were great moves. DeCosta likes to be conservative in the draft, wait for players to come to him and rack up picks, which has led to some good value selections. He drafted Kyle Hamilton, got Zay Flowers, Isaiah Likely in the 4th was a great pick, Matt Abuike in the 3rd, Nate Wiggins at number 30 was also a solid pick. DeCosta's 2025 group seems like a decent class. The green pick was a little controversial because of some of the off-field stuff, so we can't give him too many bonus points there. All in all, there's definitely been some good moves during DeCosta's tenure, but also I feel like he's been overly conservative at times with this team and has failed to build their receiver room. Lamar still doesn't have a real star on the outside, even with DeCosta spending a ton of picks at the position, including 3 first-rounders. On top of all that, he also traded Orlando Brown to their biggest competitor, the Chiefs, which was big for them and helped them win multiple Super Bowls. Overall, I think DeCosta has done a pretty good job as a GM, but I think he needs to be a bit more aggressive to bring Baltimore to the top of the AFC and to cement himself as one of the best GMs in the league. Next up, Brandon Beane. He's cooled off the past 2-3 years, but I still think you got to put him in elite when looking at his overall tenure in Buffalo. Unlike DeCosta, Beane was the one that brought in his superstar QB, and he did it in crazy fashion, trading up twice in the 1st round to end up at pick 7, and then getting his guy Josh Allen. Beane then soon after traded for a legit star wide receiver in Stephon Diggs, which was big for Allen's development and Buffalo's success as a team. He He also traded up for Tre'Davious White the year before. Additionally, Beane has done a great job of finding studs on days 2 and 3 like Matt Milano, Khalil Shakir, Christian Benford, and Terrell Bernard. He's built this Buffalo team from the ground up. However, he's been inconsistent the past few years, like I said. He's had some big misses with his first round picks, which has led to Buffalo not being able to get over the hump. So because of that, he's still far from the GOAT tier. Dan Morgan, it's still early in his career. We'll put him in average for now. He did a crazy good job of repairing Carolina's offensive line by bringing in Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis. They went from a bottom 5 unit to possibly a top 10 group, and now they have one of the better running games in the league. He's been good in free agency, but not so much in the draft. In 2024, he traded up for his guy, Xavier Legette, in the first round. Legette then had a rough rookie season. So this year, Morgan picked up Teteroa McMillan, who was also apparently his guy. 2 possession-style receivers in back-to-back years in the first round is not ideal and really a poor use of premium draft capital. His 2024 class overall is not looking great at this point. The 2025 group looks solid on paper. He found some good players on days 2 and 3, but we'll see how they do on the field. Overall, Morgan has been great in free agency, but poor in the draft, so he's in the solid tier for now. Next up, Ryan Poles. Just off vibes, he feels like a not good GM, but that trade with Carolina was just too good, man. I think we have to spare him here and put him in solid. He fleeced the Panthers and gave the Bears enough picks to completely revolutionize their squad. This was one of the most lopsided trades ever. Poles also did a good job of investing in the offensive line this offseason, bringing in Joe Thuney and Jonah Jackson. On the negative side, he's done a poor job up until this offseason of building the trenches on both sides of the ball, which was a big reason for their poor form these past few years. Poles also drafted Caleb Williams first overall, which was questionable in my opinion at least. He also agreed to send a high pick for Chase Claypool, which made absolutely no sense. Overall, Poles pulled off one of the greatest trades of all time, but has struggled to develop a strong backbone for this Bears team and has made a fair share of mistakes. Duke Tobin, he's going in not good. Duke's been the director of player personnel since 1999, and there's been a lot of mediocre Cincinnati teams during that period. The Bengals have also been well known to be one of the cheaper teams in the league, as they rarely spend a lot of money in free agency. However, he did have a good stretch from 2020 to 2022. He was lucky enough to get Joe Burrow first overall and to then have his elite college teammate Jamar Chase also fall to Cincy the next year. Tobin then did well to add Awuzie and DJ Reader in free agency, 2 great value pickups. That Cincy roster was very strong and ended up in the Super Bowl. Since then, though, the team has regressed due to questionable roster management. They've gotten rid of key defenders like Jesse Bates, Von Bell, and now likely Trey Hendrickson as well, and they've failed to replace those guys with draft picks. They have one of the worst defenses in the league as well as a poor offensive line, and Tobin decided to pay both of his big-name wide receivers this offseason instead of using some of that money to fix their weaknesses. I think trading T. Higgins for picks was a no-brainer, but alas, the Bengals went in a different direction. Overall, Tobin has struggled to build above-average rosters during his tenure and has now failed to maintain a strong contender, even while being gifted Burrow and Chase. Next up, Andrew Berry. This one's a bit controversial. No doubt the biggest move of Andrew Berry's career was trading for Deshaun Watson, one of the wildest transactions in sports history. But there have been reports that the owner may have strongly pushed for the deal, which makes sense considering that Watson got a fully guaranteed contract. So I'm not putting all the blame on Berry for that move. Honestly, I think he's quietly a solid GM. The Watson trade drained Cleveland of major resources, leaving Berry with very little to work with. Considering that, he's done a respectable job. He's built a strong offensive line and had some decent draft success. I'd say 2025 was his best showing. He added multiple playmakers and even picked up an extra first rounder for 2026. It's too early to count him out. I think the Browns should stick with him. There's a good chance his best work is still ahead. Next up, Jerry Jones. I think he's solid and pretty close to being above average. He has one of the higher hit rates in the draft and has consistently found quality players outside of the first round. He's kept Dallas strong in the trenches over the past decade, which has led to them being a good team for a majority of that period. However, I think he's been poor in finding quality free agents and finding good skill position players on offense, and he's just been overly conservative at times. Outside of CeeDee Lamb, the Cowboys have had underwhelming talent at receiver as well as running back for a good while now. I think Jerry should have been more aggressive in addressing these positions earlier. Overall, Jerry Jones has had plenty of good moments as GM, but just hasn't been aggressive enough in the past 15 years to put a serious contender together. George Paton, solid GM. He's been really consistent in the draft and has helped turn around this team from a dumpster fire to a playoff squad. He's gotten guys like Quinn Miners, Nick Bonito, Marvin Mims, and RJ Harvey all outside of the first round, but also picked up Pat Surtain, Bo Nix, and Zadeh Barron. However, he also traded for a 34-year-old Russell Wilson, which set the team back at least a couple of years. Overall, I'd say he's been average if you're looking at his entire tenure, but he's kind of been on a hot streak recently and could be on his way to above average pretty soon. Next up, Brad Holmes, elite GM. He legit has GOAT potential. He completely turned around this Detroit team. His first 3 draft classes were all masterpieces. One of the craziest heaters in GM history. He basically picked up every single star player they have during that time. He took over a squad that finished last place in the division 3 years in a row with an aging quarterback and has now turned them into a perennial contender that dominates on both sides of the trenches. He's a Super Bowl away from being an all-time great. Brian Gutekunst, he's been pretty good for the Packers. We'll put him in above average. Brian inherited a borderline playoff contender in 2018 led by Aaron Rodgers, and he's kept them as borderline contenders but hasn't been able to get them over the hump. He started off hot by drafting Jair Alexander in 2018 and then having a great offseason in 2019, signing Preston Smith, Za'Darius Smith, and Adrian Amos. He also drafted Rashawn Gary, Darnell Savage, and Elton Jenkins. At that point, he had them on the cusp of a Super Bowl. However, then in 2020, that's when he picked up Jordan Love in the first round. A pick that looks good now in hindsight. However, picking a developmental quarterback in the first round in the middle of a Super Bowl window was highly questionable and a poor move in my opinion. He also went with a power back and fullback on day 2 of that draft. I think those first 3 picks really messed up Green Bay's chances of winning a Super Bowl. 2020 was a pivotal year for that team, and he kind of dropped the ball. He's had good drafts since then, especially 2022 and 2024, and has been great in free agency recently, getting guys like Josh Jacobs and Xavier McKinney. Overall, he's made plenty of good moves and has kept Green Bay in the playoff picture, but he's been a bit too conservative and far-sighted, which has kept them from becoming a Super Bowl team. Nick Caserio, an elite GM, he's another guy that turned around a dumpster team into a perennial playoff squad. First off, he's been great with trades. Caserio offloaded Deshaun Watson in 2022, fleecing the Browns for 3 first-round picks. He also traded for Joe Mixon and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, good veteran pickups. Caserio's been very good in the draft, picking up Pro Bowl level players in his first 3 classes. He's consistently been great in the first round, but has also found studs on days 2 and 3, like Nico Collins, Jalen Petrie, Tank Dell, and Kamari Lassiter. He's created a top 3 defense on paper and a quality offense as well. He's consistently made sure that Stroud has playmakers around him, adding new good skill players each offseason. Something that not many GMs do, but something that I think is really smart. Overall, he's one of the best in the league. Chris Ballard, he's got to go into not good. Since joining in 2017, the Colts have just consistently had mediocre rosters each season and haven't been able to win in one of the worst divisions in the entire league. Ballard struggled to move on from Luck and kept trying to bring in veterans as if the Colts were one player away from being a Super Bowl team. He wasted 2020 to 2023 by getting guys like Phillip Rivers, Carson Wentz, and Matt Ryan out of their primes. He's had a couple heater draft classes in 2018 and 2020, but for the most part, he's been average in the draft. He's been great at finding value on days 2 and 3, but has missed with some of his higher picks. 2025 will be a make-or-break year for him, but I think his rosters overall have lacked direction for too long now. Next up, Brett Veach, another elite GM. Veach has been the best in the league at finding good players after round 1. It seems like each year he gets at least a couple of solid starters. He's also done wonders to improve Mahomes' offensive line by drafting Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith, and also acquiring Joe Thuney as well as Orlando Brown. They've moved off Brown at this point, but have now brought in Josh Simmons, who should be a plus starter. He's helped create a modern-day dynasty, so I don't think there's any real debate here as to where he should be. Joe Hortiz, he had a great first year in 2024. Joe had an elite draft and also made smart free agency pickups like Poona Ford and Elijah Molden. However, his 2025 offseason was a little disappointing. He brought in 2 power backs in Najee Harris and Omarion Hampton, and obviously used a first-round pick on Hampton. Not really the best pickups in my opinion. His draft class overall wasn't too impressive, and his free agency signings were underwhelming as well. The offense still lacks speed, and the defense lacks young playmakers. We'll put him in solid for now. Next up, we got Les Sneed. He's one of the best. Since joining the Rams in 2012, he's kept them at the top of the NFC. He's been elite when it comes to drafting. He's added at least 2 starters in basically every draft. And a lot of players that he picked since 2012 are still in the league, whether they play for the Rams or another team. Sneed also completed the Stafford trade as well as the Ramsey deal. He also made aggressive moves in 2021, such as trading for Von Miller and signing Odell in order to spark LA's Super Bowl run. Sneed has made the most of his resources and has also been aggressive when he's needed to be. No doubt about this placement. Chris Grier, this might be a little harsh, but I think he has to go in not good. A big reason for that is just him being overly committed to Tua, as well as just poor roster construction. Grier did put together an elite set of skill position players on Miami's offense. However, I think he should have looked for a new quarterback at some point. Tua has shown that he's below the top guys in the league and has also struggled to stay on the field. The recent extension they gave him was absolutely outrageous. Besides the Tua issue, the Dolphins also haven't been very tough in the trenches, which has led to poor results against better teams. Miami has opted for flashy players too often, making splash moves instead of retaining homegrown talent. Ultimately, they've failed to build a fundamentally strong core, and strong locker room, which is why they've stayed as a mid-table team. To cut Grier some slack though, Miami has had bad luck with injuries, and it seems like he's been pressured in the past by the owner to bring in big names. Grier's been pretty solid at drafting and has brought in a lot of good players, but I think overall it's difficult to say he's objectively done a good job of building this Miami team, whether that's his fault or not. There's been too many risky pickups, and they've often been overly aggressive in trying to become a contender in the short term instead of building from the ground up. Next up, we got Kwesi from the Vikings, above average GM. He's been probably the best in the league in terms of finding value on the free agent market. He's picked up guys like Andrew Van Ginkel, Jonathan Grenard, Byron Murphy, Zadarius Smith, Blake Cashman, Aaron Jones, and Sam Darnold, all guys that ended up playing well for Minnesota, and some of those guys have turned into Pro Bowl level players. In the draft though, he's been quite the opposite. 2022 was really rough. He went maybe 1 of 10 with Jalen Naylor being the only decent pick. His other 3 drafts were also below average, but I do think the McCarthy class will gain some more love after this year. Overall, he's been below average in the draft, but he's been so good in free agency that he's still been able to establish himself as one of the best young GMs. Joe Schoen, I think he's pretty solid. He inherited a complete mess from the previous GM, David Gettleman, but I think he's done enough good things to avoid the not good tier. He's had back-to-back good draft performances and has provided New York with a superstar on offense in Malik Neighbors. Shane also did well to get Brian Burns for just a second-round pick, and he made a nice signing in Bobby Okereke in free agency. Shane's added pieces to the squad and has made sure to lock down franchise guys like Andrew Thomas and Dexter Lawrence. He's built up the trenches, but their lack of talent at QB as well as their tough division has made it hard to get results. On the negative side, he extended Danny Dimes and kept him around for way too long. He also had some rough draft classes his first couple goes, and he also reached for Jackson Dart this year. But if you've seen his post-draft interviews, you know that he made it clear that Dart was not his guy. Overall, he's had ups and downs, but I think he's been decent for New York. Elliot Wolf, he's only been around since 2024, so it's a little early, but I think he's been solid so far. Wolf selected Drake May in 2024, which was an obvious pick, but then bombed the rest of the draft besides the Joe Milton selection. Jalen Polk over Ladd McConkey was absolutely insane. He did bounce back this offseason though. He added Stephon Diggs and produced an elite draft class with plus players on all 3 days. Overall, he had a bumpy start, but he has improved his team over the past 2 off seasons, so I think you have to give him some props. Mickey Loomis, this one's a tough one. From my understanding, Loomis is mainly just managing the cap for New Orleans, but isn't necessarily making all the personnel decisions. He's great at what he does. He seems to always make the cap work for the Saints, and New Orleans has only had 6 losing seasons with Loomis since he arrived in 2002. However, they're now in a really tough spot with tight money and an old roster. I'm not exactly sure how much the blame should be on Loomis, but all things considered, I think we can slide him in the solid tier. Omar Khan, this is one I honestly think is too early to tell. Khan took over after the draft in 2022 and has been in an awkward spot. It seems the Steelers are hell-bent on contending for a title, but their roster lacks star power, especially on offense, and they don't have enough good draft capital to get quality playmakers. Khan has had some okay draft classes, but has struggled to add actual difference makers to the team. He was basically backed into a corner this offseason, and he came up with Rodgers and Metcalf, which I think is not that bad. The Steelers are clearly going all in this year, which probably won't work, but I think it was a decent effort by Khan to fix the offense with not many options. Overall, I think solid's fair for him. Next up, John Schneider. I think you got to give him above average. Schneider played a key role in building the Seahawks' Super Bowl winning core. He helped create the Legion of Boom, drafted Russell Wilson, and pulled off the trade for Marshawn Lynch. He was instrumental in making that dynasty happen. However, his track record since then has been more hit or miss. It's also important to note that during much of Schneider's tenure, final say on personnel decisions reportedly rested with Pete Carroll, which makes it difficult to fully assess how much credit or blame Schneider deserves. One of his most criticized moves was the Jamal Adams trade, where the Seahawks gave up a massive haul for a safety whose performance declined after arriving in Seattle. He's also made some questionable signings, including Eddie Lacy, Jimmy Graham, and Draymond Jones, all of whom failed to meet expectations. Despite these missteps, Schneider has continued to show real strength in the draft, often finding impact players outside of the first round. He built a Super Bowl team and has largely kept Seattle competitive. Still, if he wants to be considered among the league's elite general managers, he'll need to prove he can build another true contender, this time without Pete Carroll. John Lynch, elite GM, he's been one of the best at drafting since getting the gig in 2017. Lynch has found multiple All-Pros and Pro Bowlers, including George Kittle, Fred Warner, Nick Bosa, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and Talanoa Hufanga. The list of good players he's found in the draft is actually crazy long. There's also Brock Purdy, Lenore, Juwan Jennings, all of whom he got on day 3. His drafting resume is arguably the best on this entire list. Lynch has also found great players on the trade market, including Christian McCaffrey and Trent Williams, who are both massive contributors to their last Super Bowl run. The Niners haven't been able to win a championship, but Lynch made teams good enough to make it to the Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo and Brock Purdy. He's proven himself as an elite roster builder. Next up, Jason Licht, a very good GM as of recent, but he just hasn't been consistent enough over his full tenure to go an elite, so we'll put him in above average. He's had some misses in the draft like Vernon Hargreaves and OJ Howard, but for the most part, he's been excellent in finding elite talent. Licht picked Mike Evans, Vita Vea, Tristan Wirfs, Chris Godwin, Antoine Winfield, and Bucky Irving. Almost all those guys have been amongst the best in their position since entering the league. Licht was a big part of creating their Super Bowl team and has kept Tampa as a solid playoff contender even after Brady's departure, although some of that success is due to them playing in a terrible division, but still props to Licht. And lastly, Adam Peters. He's only been in Washington since the beginning of 2024, but he's completely transformed the team. It is mainly due to being gifted Jaden Daniels, though, after the Bears passed on him. However, you have to give Peters some respect. He also added Mike Sainristil and signed Frankie Louvu, two guys who have become key players on their defense. With their success last year, Peters decided to be aggressive this offseason and bring in Deebo Samuel and Laramie Tunsil, who should help improve the offense even more. Overall, Peters has done a great job so far, but has also been lucky to get Jaden Daniels and to be in a situation with a massive amount of cap space where he could trade for guys like Samuel and Tunsil. For those reasons, I'm only giving him above average. So that's my tier list for NFL general managers. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe if you like the content. Thanks for watching, and I'm out.